It was an autumn morning in Boston. Sunlight slipped gently through rows of glass buildings, reflecting off the supercars inside as if placing them in another world, a world of power status and limitless credit cards. The automatic glass doors of Boston Prestige Motors slid open, not to welcome a politician or a famous business person, but to welcome a girl. Brielle Thompson, 16 years old, black, wearing a slightly wrinkled school uniform and a pair of worn sneakers. Her natural curls rested gently at her shoulders. Her eyes were calm, not shimmering with makeup, but carrying something distinct: serenity, determination, and self-possession. She stopped before a ruby-red Lamborghini Aventador SVJ Roadster, a limited edition, only for those so wealthy they didn't need to ask the price. Her fingers lightly touched the edge of the glass, her lips curled into a faint smile, a smile not meant to show off, but like a whisper, "He's going to be very surprised." But the silence was broken by a sharp voice. "Excuse me, but this isn't a display zone." A man's voice rang out from behind, cold and precise, like a well-sharpened blade. Grant Miller, the longtime manager of the showroom, stepped forward. His icy blue eyes swept over Brielle from head to toe. There wasn't the slightest hint of doubt in his gaze, only disdain veiled under a polite smile. "I think you're in the wrong place. These cars are for actual customers." A few staff members behind him stifled laughs. A middle-aged customer raised his eyebrows, leaned toward his wife, and whispered something. Everyone seemed to agree silently that girl didn't belong here. Brielle could feel every stare probing her like magnifying glasses on an intruder. Her cheeks grew warm, not from anger, but from humiliation. Yet she said nothing. No words in return, no pleading eyes, no hatred, only a single step back, gentle, deliberate, as if she were closing a book before the good part began. And she stepped out of the showroom. No one knew, no one could have imagined. Just a few hours later, they would witness a return that would change everything forever, erasing the line they once drew themselves: who is worthy and who is not. The next morning, Boston woke up under a deceptively peaceful sky. The cobblestone streets gleamed after a night of rain. Luxury cars began to glide through the city's proud, upscale rhythm. But something unusual happened outside Boston Prestige Motors, where appearances always mattered more than essence. A jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom slithered in silently, its V12 engine barely producing a sound beyond the breath of power. The glassy windshield gleamed like a mirror reflecting the sun and the magnificent showroom facade. Grant Miller had just set down his espresso when the familiar sound of that engine made him stand up instantly. "Whose car is that?" a staff member whispered. "Look at the plate. It's a custom plate, one of only 10 in North America." Another replied voice, a mix of awe and caution. The car door opened. Before the eyes of the entire showroom, the first person to step out wasn't a mogul or a successful businessman. It was the very girl they threw out yesterday, Brielle Thompson. No fur coat, no Christian Louboutin heels, no bodyguards, no show. Still the same old uniform, the worn sneakers, and the gently curled natural hair. But this time, her eyes carried no hesitation. They held a deep, still-water calm, looking like someone who knew exactly who she was and why she was here. No one said a word. Even Grant, the man who just yesterday had smugly looked down on her as an ignorant child, was frozen in the moment. His face stiffened as he realized that Rolls-Royce wasn't rented, wasn't borrowed. It was privately owned, and the person inside was the owner. Brielle didn't look around. She walked straight into the showroom, striding confidently across the polished marble floor where her footprints had once been full of shame. She was no longer just a lost black girl. Today, She returned as someone who knew exactly why she was here. In the corner, some elite customers who had mocked her yesterday now froze. Silence spread like a cold wave across every pair of eyes. Grant stepped forward, trying to muster a weak smile, but his nervousness betrayed him. "You came back." Brielle turned to him. Her eyes weren't bitter or scornful, just clear and calm to an almost terrifying degree. "Yes, I have more time today. I want to take a closer look at the Lamborghini from yesterday. The one you said wasn't for me." That sentence, spoken so lightly, hit with the weight of a slap to his manufactured pride. The air thickened. No one laughed. No one dared speak. And once again, all eyes turned toward the girl in the old uniform, but this time with an entirely different gaze. The interior of Boston Prestige Motors was now eerily quiet, like the stillness before a storm. Well-dressed employees froze mid-action, some while wiping glass panels, others with fingers hovering over keyboards. Customers paused mid-conversation, wine glasses still raised, but not sipped. No one spoke yet. Every eye turned toward one place. Brielle Thompson, the girl in the wrinkled old-school uniform, stood among rows of million-dollar cars with the aura of someone who didn't need anyone's validation, yet left everyone speechless. Grant Miller stepped forward, attempting to reclaim control. Though still rattled inside, he remained convinced that people like Brielle couldn't possess real power. With a contrived expression, he smirked. "The Lamborghini Aventador SVJ isn't just something anyone can walk up to. It's a limited edition, starting at nearly $600,000. People who come to see cars like this are usually a bit different from you." As soon as he finished speaking, a soft chuckle came from a nearby staff member, not loud enough to be overtly disrespectful, but not so quiet that Brielle couldn't hear it. The young girl slowly walked toward the blazing red supercar, her hand gently gliding across the glossy surface like congealed blood. Her eyes sparkled not with interest in the price or the status, but with something that echoed deep inside her chest. He will never guess. A memory surfaced in Brielle's mind like an old photograph, her father Elijah Thompson reading in the evening, his glasses sliding slightly down his nose, and the words he once said echoing in her ears. "You can't choose where you're born, but you can always choose how you walk, especially under judgmental stares." Brielle stood tall, turning to face Grant. Her eyes were no longer those of a teenage girl, but of someone who understood the true meaning of dignity and silence. "I didn't come here to draw attention," she said, her voice calm and even. "I came to learn more about the car I intend to give my father, a gift for his 50th birthday." The words landed like an arrow straight into the collective psyche of the entire showroom. Grant faltered slightly, but then, almost fed by the skepticism brewing within him, he let out a mocking laugh. "I see. A birthday gift, huh, I suppose? Your dad's going to be quite surprised." Brielle didn't get angry. She smiled, a subtle smile so faint that it was impossible to tell whether it was forgiveness or a challenge. Then another staff member stepped toward her, but this time not to stop her. Jared Collins, a young man in a slightly oversized suit, with a face that radiated genuine kindness, paused in front of Brielle. "Hi, I'm Jared," he said, voice quiet but sincere. "I noticed you're very interested in the SVJ. I'd be happy to help if you'd like more information on its specs, order timeline, and interior customization options." Grant spun around sharply, eyes blazing with fury at Jared, but the young employee didn't back down. Brielle gave a slight nod. For the first time since she entered this place, someone looked at her as a human being. "Thank you, Jared," she replied, with that same quiet smile. "I'm completely serious. Outside the showroom, sunlight continued streaming through large panes of glass, reflecting off the fiery red car as if it were waiting for something monumental to happen. And inside, a silent confrontation had officially begun between a young girl and a system of beliefs built on prejudice and skin color. The atmosphere in the showroom grew dense, like every molecule in the space was waiting for something to explode. Jared Collins stood by Brielle's side, patiently explaining the engine layout, carbon interior options, sound systems, and the special personalization packages exclusive to the Lamborghini Aventador SVJ. Brielle listened intently, nodding at each point. She didn't speak much, but her eyes were sharply focused. Every bit of information she absorbed wasn't just for the car. It was for her dignity. Grant Miller stood only a few feet away, jaw clenched, eyes darkening as he watched Jared, a junior employee, serve someone Grant had dismissed yesterday like a homeless kid. He could no longer bear it. Grant strode over each step, thudding on the marble like war drums. A birthday gift, Grant sneered, cutting Jared off mid-sentence. Little girl, do you even understand what this car is? This isn't some toy that dreamy little princesses pick to impress people. Jared paused, but Brielle did not. She turned to Grant, her eyes unwavering, calm and direct. I know exactly what it is. This is a limited model, 6.5-litre, E12 770 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds. Only 800 units made globally. Her answer made a few eavesdropping customers turn and look at her in a different light. Grant still didn't stop. He tilted his head now with a provocation-laced grin. I'm very impressed, but I'm afraid you're deluding yourself. $600,000 isn't the kind of money students usually carry around in their school bags. Maybe a Toyota Corolla suits your age and background. The word background was emphasized like a nail driven deep into the wall of dignity that Brielle had been building with her quiet composure. The atmosphere cracked. Some people exchanged glances. One shook their head, another bit their lip as if to speak but held back. Jared opened his mouth to respond, but Grant's glare fired over like a silent command. Don't interfere. Brielle looked directly at Grant. I didn't come here to discuss wallets or skin color, Mr. Miller. I'm simply asking for what any customer deserves: product information. Her voice wasn't raised, but every word struck at Grant's layer of arrogance like a hammer on glass. Grant scoffed, leaned in close. You think you're a real customer here? You think you can walk in dressed like that and be seen on the same level as my VIP clients? Brielle stood firm, not a single step back. No, I don't think so. I know so. A long silence swept through the showroom, and this time it wasn't mockery, it was discomfort. Because everyone who had ridiculed her yesterday was beginning to feel that something was wrong. The girl they'd looked down on the day before wasn't bowing her head, wasn't crying, wasn't backing away. She was preparing for something much bigger, a storm they had summoned. The atmosphere inside the showroom was no longer a cold silence. It had transformed into a suffocating tension, like a thin wire stretched to its breaking point, needing only the slightest tug to snap. Grant Miller took another step closer, his fake smile now gone. His eyes glinted with contempt, but mixed with confusion. Brielle Thompson stood her ground like a small stone wedged in the path of a roaring waterfall of pride. You can leave right now, Grant said, his voice dropping low this time, so cold it didn't bother to hide anymore. Before you further embarrass yourself. Some eyes shifted. A few customers began to feel uncomfortable, but no one said a word. Brielle clenched her hands slightly, her small shoulders trembling, not from fear, but because of the wave of emotion swelling up from being held in for far too long. In her mind, her father's voice echoed Elijah Thompson, who had once whispered to her the night before, "Dignity isn't something people give you. You must hold on to it even when others try to rip it away." She lifted her head, her gaze shining as brightly as sunlight, piercing through storm clouds. "Mr. Miller," her voice wasn't loud, but steady as stone. "I know who I am, and I don't need you to define that for me. I'm not here to play the victim. I came to learn from someone I deeply respect and love." Grant growled, "A Lamborghini Aventador isn't for little girls pretending to be adults. If you're trying to stage some inspirational story for TikTok or something, then I suggest you go ahead." Soft chuckles broke out from the back, cold, emotionless. Brielle turned, scanning the showroom once again. Every face wore a familiar shape: doubt, ridicule, judgment. She saw Jared in the far corner, the only one whose gaze remained steady and clear. She took a deep breath, then quietly turned away. No running, no tears, just walking slow, dignified steps, as if she were exiting a stage unworthy of truth. The showroom's glass doors opened once more. Sunlight poured over her shoulders, forming a delicate halo. At that moment, Brielle looked back slightly. Her final glance at Grant was no longer filled with sadness, nor anger. It was a silent promise. "I'll be back, but not to buy a car." The next morning, no one inside Boston Prestige Motors could quite remember how the day had begun. Only that the atmosphere remained busy, the espresso still overpriced, and footsteps still rushed in preparation for high-end clientele. Grant Miller, as usual, stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. Feeling as if he had neatly handled a minor incident the day before. In his mind, that girl, what was her name again? Brielle something, was nothing more than a forgettable speck of dust. Until the low, deliberate engine rumble of a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom echoed outside, gliding in as if it had nothing to prove. The entire showroom stopped in unison. A black man in his early 50s, Elijah Thompson, stepped out of the car. No need for introduction, no bodyguards, no diamond watches or Italian leather shoes. Just a perfectly tailored grey suit, a calm demeanor, and eyes cold as ice, sharpened through million-dollar boardrooms and years of being underestimated by the world. Grant stepped out to greet him, and his professional smile instantly activated. "Welcome, sir. I'm Grant Miller, the manager here. We're honored to have the chance to serve." The man did not shake his hand. He looked straight at Grant, and his voice, deep, clear, and cold as metal against glass, cut through. "I'm not here to be served. I'm here to ask about how you served my daughter yesterday. Her name is Brielle Thompson." That sentence hit the room like a flipped table. Grant stood frozen. His breath felt sucked out of his lungs. The name Thompson, only now did it drain the color from his face. Jared Collins instinctively clenched his notebook in the corner. He knew this moment would come, but hadn't expected it so soon or sharply. Grant stammered, "I didn't know she was your daughter. If I had known, I would have." Elijah cut him off, colder than before. "So if she hadn't been my daughter, just another black girl in a school uniform walking into this showroom, would your treatment have been perfectly acceptable?" The entire showroom held its breath. Eyes began to shift. They no longer looked at Brielle. They were now looking at Grant. Elijah stepped inside. No one dared to stop him. He stopped directly in front of the fiery red Lamborghini SVJ, the car his daughter had once tried to buy to surprise her father. "I'm not here to purchase the car anymore," he said, facing Grant and the showroom owner, Leonard Hayes, who had just emerged from the office. "I'm here to address a problem." At that moment, Jared stepped forward. His face was tense, but his eyes held courage. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "I was there the entire time yesterday. And I can confirm Brielle was belittled, humiliated, solely because of how she dressed and the color of her skin. Leonard Hayes turned white as a sheet. Grant swallowed hard. He knew things had spiraled far out of control. Elijah stood in the center of the showroom like a living verdict. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to threaten. His silence alone was judgment enough. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm demanding concrete action to ensure that what happened to Brielle never happens to anyone else. And right then, for the first time, the entire showroom understood this black man wasn't just a disgruntled customer. He was the final reckoning. No one said a word. No one dared to move. Elijah Thompson stood in the center of the showroom, like an epicenter of a silent quake. His face wasn't angry, but his eyes deep and dark, as an abyss left no room for evasion. He stared directly at Grant Miller and Leonard Hayes, two men who once prided themselves on running a professional environment, yet had allowed arrogance and prejudice to bear their ugliest faces. I've heard the explanations, Elijah said slowly, his voice slicing through the showroom like a blade through the thin veil of faux civility, and I've also witnessed your silence when speaking was most necessary. Grant opened his mouth, trying to justify himself, but Elijah gently raised a hand without needing more words. I don't need promises that this won't happen again. I want both of you to look into the eyes of the people you once didn't even bother to acknowledge. He turned to Leonard, then back to Grant. Starting tomorrow, the two of you will report as full-time volunteers at the Carter Foundation, a center that supports education and reintegration for black children, immigrant kids, and other marginalized communities. 2 weeks, no interruptions, no delegating. Leonard Hayes's eyes widened. Grant turned pale. The Carter Foundation, that place they'd only heard mentioned in charity speeches but never imagined stepping into. Mr. Thompson, Leonard spoke softly, I understand this matter is serious, but we're businessmen, not social workers. Isn't this a bit excessive? Elijah looked at him not angrily, but with the cold disappointment of someone who expected better. Mr. Hayes, if stepping outside your circle of privilege feels like too far, then I'd say your showroom has been off course for a very long time. Grant lowered his head, lips pressed tight. His hands trembled, but not from rage, from shame. Jared Collins, who had seen everything unfold, clutched his notebook tighter. Something long suppressed rose in his chest. He didn't just admire Elijah, he was awakened. He realized this is how a father teaches his child, not with words but with action. Elijah took another step forward. I won't withdraw my request. This isn't revenge. It's the only chance either of you has to understand the hurt Brielle and millions like her truly carry daily because of biases you've never had to fight against. Grant looked up, eyes bloodshot. And if I refuse, Elijah remained quiet for a moment. Then calmly, he pulled a file folder from his inner coat pocket, without drama or spectacle, and laid it on the reception desk in the center of the showroom. In this file is a lawsuit surveillance footage from yesterday, employee testimony, and an open letter from the board of Thompson Group, the same group that owns 12% of all luxury car distribution across New England. His voice wasn't loud, but every word struck like a funeral bell. You're not choosing between charity or not. You're choosing between learning how to treat people or disappearing from this market. Leonard nearly collapsed into a chair, head in hands. Grant was frozen, no way out. No masks left. Only one path remained to make things right. Not with money, but with truth. Elijah turned, sweeping his gaze across the entire showroom, not to intimidate, but to plant a belief he held firm. No one gets to decide who deserves respect. based on appearance. And with that he walked out, leaving behind not ruin, but the beginning of a necessary reckoning. Monday morning, the sky was strangely clear, as if nature deliberately clashed with the storm brewing inside the two men standing at the gate of a small facility in South Boston. On the wooden sign hung a simple message: Carter Foundation, where compassion takes root. Grant Miller and Leonard Hayes were still in suits, an old habit that hadn't died. But amid the sun-drenched schoolyard, the laughter of children and rows of young trees swaying in the wind, those suits only made them look misplaced. Grant crossed his arms, stone-faced, surveying the area warily. Despite trying to look composed, Leonard couldn't hide his discomfort as children in worn sandals and faded shirts ran past. Marilyn Turner, the foundation's director, stepped out to greet them. She was a black woman in her early 40s, her hair in a high, natural bun, her face gentle, but her eyes sharp as razors. "Welcome to reality," she said bluntly. "Mr. Thompson has fully briefed me. I don't care who you are out there. In here, you're both rookies, and rookies start with the smallest jobs." Grant raised a brow, his face stiffening. "You mean tasks like cooking, cleaning classrooms, babysitting?" "I said the smallest jobs, not the lowest. Here, someone who sets a lunch table with love holds more value than someone who signs million-dollar contracts with disdain." Grant gripped the strap of his bag, jaw clenched. Leonard merely nodded, too unsure to speak. The community room glowed with morning sunlight. Children, primarily black and immigrant, studied, drew and read. There was no brand-name gear or tech gadgets, just wrinkled paper and short, blunt pencils. Caleb Jackson, a black boy around 8, was coloring with his left hand. He was wearing a stretched t-shirt and jeans with torn knees. Beside him lay a frayed backpack with duct-taped straps. Grant sat beside him, not out of will, but because Marilyn told him to. Caleb looked up and smiled brightly. "You're new, huh?" Grant nodded stiffly. "What's your name?" he asked. "I'm Caleb. My mum always said the new people should be the first to get a welcome." A second of silence. Grant glanced at the old backpack on the table. "Why don't you get a new one?" Caleb looked up, still smiling, but his voice softened. "My mum gave me this one before. She passed away. I feel she's still with me every time I look at it." That answer, gentle as wind, hit the softest spot in Grant's mind, a place he'd buried long ago. He swallowed. For the first time, no sarcastic comment escaped his lips. Across the room, Leonard was fumbling to make milk bottles for a group of toddlers. His hands, trained for mergers and negotiations, shook while he unscrewed the water jug. A curly-haired girl tugged at his sleeve. "You poured too much," she said sweetly. He jumped slightly. The girl beamed. "It's okay. Next time you'll be better." That sentence was sincere and straightforward, which made Leonard pause. His entire life had been shaped by a world where mistakes cost money and errors meant termination. But here, mistakes were met with smiles. As the sun dipped low, the kids had all gone home. Grant sat alone on a wooden bench in the yard, watching Caleb kick a patched-up soccer ball. The boy ran over and held it out. "Wanna play?" Grant didn't answer, but for the first time in years, he nodded. As the ball rolled across the little yard beneath a glowing red sunset, the man who once mocked a black girl for her appearance was now learning how to see people not with his eyes, but with his heart. Day 3 at the Carter Foundation. Grant Miller, once the man who walked with pride through supercar showcases and million-dollar wine galas, was now sitting with a group of third-graders folding colored paper. His crisp white shirt sleeves were rolled high, though a streak of glue still stained the cuff. He didn't say it out loud, but he frowned less these days. Checked his watch less, too. As for Leonard Hayes, He'd learned to tie 3 kids' shoelaces in under 2 minutes, a personal record. And for the first time in over 2 decades managing a luxury showroom, he was being thanked not with a signature, but with a child's hug. But the one who changed Grant the most was still Caleb Jackson. The little boy didn't do anything extraordinary. He showed up every day with the same warm, honest smile, still carrying that torn backpack and still wearing those frayed shoes. But whenever he spoke to Grant, he looked him directly in the eye without suspicion or fear. And that made Grant feel unworthy. One afternoon, Grant walked into a small classroom and saw Caleb sitting alone by the window, tapping a ripped strap on his backpack. "Why don't you just ask for a new one?" Grant asked again. Caleb didn't look up. His voice was soft. "I already have one. The center gave it to me on my birthday." "Then why still use this?" Caleb looked up. His eyes were calm, painfully so. "Because it was the last thing my mum gave me. I don't want to throw it away, even if it's torn. To me, it's still beautiful." Grant froze. His thoughts spun not because of the backpack, but because of a harsh truth that this boy cherished something worn and broken. While Grant had once scorned a person simply for wearing a wrinkled blouse, he thought of Brielle, her calm gaze, clear voice, and refusal to shrink even as she was publicly humiliated. At the time, he saw it as nothing more than arrogance from someone who didn't know her place. But now he understood. She was like Caleb, and he had been entirely wrong. That evening, Grant didn't go home right away. He sat in the courtyard watching Caleb play soccer with other kids, not to supervise, but to reflect and silently regret. Jared Collins, the young employee from the showroom, had stopped by the center that day. He sat next to Grant for a while, then quietly asked, "Do you still think what happened at the showroom was just a misunderstanding? Or are you starting to see it as a real problem?" Grant didn't answer right away. After a long pause, he whispered, "I used to think I was good at judging people. Turns out, I was only judging clothes." That night back home, Grant sat in front of his phone for a long time. The screen was blank, but inside he was no longer silent. At last, he typed slowly but sincerely, "Brielle, if you happen to see this message, I want to say I was wrong, not because of who your father is, but because of who you are. I failed to see that. I'm sorry." He pressed send, not expecting a reply, just hoping for a beginning. That same night, as Grant sent off a message that felt heavier than stone, he had no idea that on the other end, a 16-year-old girl stood by her bedroom window, holding a cup of lukewarm cocoa, staring out over a lavender-filled garden. Brielle Thompson wasn't thinking about the showroom anymore. Not about the ridicule, not about the silence, not about that suffocating laughter. She was thinking about her father, Elijah Thompson, and the final lesson he gave her before flying out for an international energy summit. "You've protected your dignity, Brielle, but forgiveness is when you give someone else a chance to keep their humanity." Her phone lit up. A message from Grant Miller. She read it slowly. There were no justifications, no excuses. There are only 3 things: ownership, self-awareness, and an apology that doesn't lower itself but lifts someone else. She didn't reply, not out of anger, but because she knew forgiveness wasn't in the word reply, it was how she would look at him if they ever met again. The next morning at Boston Prestige Motors, the air felt different. The glass still gleamed. Light shimmered across the Ferrari, the Bentley, and of course the red Lamborghini Aventador SVJ Roadster, which still glistened at the center of the showroom. But this time it wasn't Brielle who walked in. It was Elijah Thompson. Beside him was Jared Collins, the young employee who had spoken up that day and now led with quiet pride. The entire staff stood. The same people who had stayed silent before now stood tall. Something within them had changed. Grant Miller wasn't there, not because he was hiding, but because he was at the Carter Foundation just as he'd promised. Elijah walked to the SVJ Roadster. His hand brushed the sleek curves of the car, stopping at the steering wheel. He didn't look at the vehicle. He looked at Jared. "You were the first person here who saw my daughter for her character, not her last name. And the only one who deserves to complete this transaction." Jared was stunned. You want me to handle the deal?" Elijah nodded. "I didn't buy this car to show off. I bought it because my daughter picked it with her whole heart. And I want you, the one who truly listened when everyone else turned their back, to finalize it." Jared blinked back tears, nodding slowly, eyes shining like a kid entering their dream school. An hour later in the private signing room, Jared was going through the contract when Elijah asked suddenly, "Do you think she'll forgive Grant?" Jared paused, then smiled softly. "Last night she told me. She got a message, short but enough, and she said, 'I don't know if I'll reply right away, but next time I see him, I won't look at him like he's beneath me anymore.'" Elijah nodded, said nothing, but in his eyes was a deep sense of relief, because he knew Grant Miller had finally begun the journey to become a man he never realized he could be. Later that evening, as Jared locked up the office, a message popped up on his phone. From Brielle, "Thank you for not staying silent that day, and thank you for not becoming like them." Jared stood quietly, the sunset glowing through the showroom glass. And somewhere far from there at the Carter Foundation, Grant Miller quietly wiped dirt off a little boy's shoes. Not because anyone told him to, but because for the first time, his heart told him it mattered. 1 month later, the grand ballroom of the Bostonian Hotel shimmered under soft golden lights. That evening, the elegance was very different, not flashy, not ostentatious, but quiet and profound, as if the entire room was waiting for something more genuine than satin gowns and silk ties. The annual gala of the Carter Foundation was a night to gather sponsors, benefactors, and everyone who had walked alongside the mission of creating opportunity for forgotten children. And tonight, under the glow of chandeliers, Grant Miller would come face to face with the past he once avoided. Grant entered the ballroom in a simple tuxedo, without a bow tie and a pocket square, not trying to prove anything through appearance for the first time. Next to him was Leonard Hayes, also absent from his usual tension. The two men stood silently observing the people they once considered beneath their class, now smiling, chatting, and even more astonishing, being respected. No one looked at them as powerful businessmen. They were seen as two men who had lived through something tangible. And then, just as the music softened, the ballroom doors opened again. Brielle Thompson walked in. She wasn't wearing a princess dress, no exposed shoulders, sequins, or heels. Just a deep blue dress, clean, modest V-neck, elegant in its simplicity. Her hair fell naturally, and her eyes, bright, steady, unyielding, were the same as the day she turned her head in that showroom. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Her presence said everything. Grant found himself holding his breath. The girl he had once insulted, dismissed, now walked past him like a breeze light, but every step pressing down on his chest like stone. Brielle saw him. She paused. Their eyes met. No rage, no contempt, just silence and a quiet question. "Have you truly changed?" Grant bowed his head, not too low, but enough to say, "I know I was wrong, and I am not running." Brielle smiled, gently but clearly. She stepped forward. "Good evening, Mr. Miller." Grant looked up slowly. "Good evening, Brielle. I know words alone aren't enough, but I've thought about that day every single day since." She nodded. not forced, not too forgiving. I don't need you to keep apologizing. I want to see you prove it not to me but to everyone you once chose not to see. Grant took a deep breath. I'm trying, and I will keep trying, even if no one's watching. Brielle narrowed her eyes, as if peering directly into his soul. Then she extended her hand. Then let's start tonight. Grant gently took her hand, and for the first time in his life, the handshake didn't happen across a boardroom table, but on the foundation of something truly human. Later that evening, Elijah Thompson took the stage. The lights dimmed. He stood still for a moment, then spoke with quiet warmth. There are mistakes that money cannot fix. There are wounds that lawyers cannot patch. But some changes begin with something small, when we choose to see others as people. He paused, eyes falling to the front table where Brielle sat. And 3 tables behind Grant Miller was listening. His gaze no longer dodged, no longer dark, only the calm light of someone who once fell and now was rising with his own hands. 3 months after the gala, Boston Prestige Motors had changed, not just in hiring employees from diverse backgrounds, not just with a new policy banning discrimination or judging customers by appearance, but in the atmosphere, in how they greeted visitors, in the eyes of the staff when someone walked in. No more scrutinizing, only a sincere welcome. And the person leading that entire transformation was Grant Miller, no longer sitting behind his glass-walled office, no longer delegating odd customers to someone else. He now stood by the door every morning, greeting everyone, not asking, "Do you have an appointment, but how can I help you today?" One Thursday afternoon, the showroom's bell rang. All the employees paused for a second because the person who walked in was Brielle Thompson. Still the simple dress, still the loose hair, still those eyes that made people straighten up. But this time, she wasn't here to challenge anyone. She was here as a guest and a witness. Grant stepped forward immediately. "Welcome back," he said. "This showroom now belongs to people like you too." Brielle looked around and saw a young Latina woman advising a couple. An Asian American man is photographing a car for a client. An older gentleman teaches a single mother how to install a child seat in a Porsche Cayenne. She nodded. "No more apologies needed, Mr. Miller. I see it now. You kept your word." At the end of her visit, she stood beside Grant by the glass wall. The setting sun gleamed off the polished vehicles, but they were no longer the only things shining. "You know," Brielle said softly, "no one looked me in the eye the first time I came here. They looked at my clothes, my hair, and my skin. But today, every staff member looked directly at me, direct and warm." Grant smiled faintly. "You taught me a lesson no business school ever did. That dignity isn't in what we wear, it's in how we see others, and how we see ourselves." The following week, a photo went viral on social media. In it, a 16-year-old black girl backpack over her shoulder, standing next to a grey-haired man. Both crouched down, smiling and speaking to a young child entering the showroom. In a wheelchair, the caption read, "No one deserves to be judged by appearances." And sometimes, the people who change the world start with a simple line, "I'm just here to look." The story ends here. No fireworks, only the gentle glow of quiet change. Brielle never became a media figure. She continued her studies, read, and walked into spaces that once seemed to exclude her, and made spaces for everyone, because justice is not always a shout. Sometimes it is perseverance, a steady gaze, a dignity unshaken, even when the world turns its back.